Okay, so before we go to the sphere, just to mention here with the cast shadow, the same idea. I've got to determine how the light is gradating from light to dark in the cast shadow. And usually it's going to be darker, sort of closer to the object. And as the cast shadow moves away from the object, ambient light's going to get in and kind of degrade the shadow. So you're going to usually have a darker, unless something, some strong kind of reflected light action is happening in the cast shadow. The shadow is going to be darker where it's closer to the object. The edge is also going to be sharper. And as you move away from the object, again, the edge is sort of degraded by light coming in from other sources, and the value will also lighten as it moves away. Okay, now when we look at the sphere is going to be our stand-in for any rounded object. If we can understand how gradation works on a sphere, then we can apply that to a cone and a cylinder and any other rounded form. So the key here is to identify where you feel like the light is hitting most directly. So with the light coming from above to the right and in front of the object, the lightest area is going to be up in here somewhere. All right. So that's different from the highlight. The highlight is a reflection of the light source off the object to your eye. That's not necessarily where the light's hitting most directly. So you don't want to just gradate away from the highlight. You want to kind of forget about the highlight at the beginning. And I know it's got to be here because it can't be on the edge, because it would be on the edge if the light source was further that way and I had like a half and half situation. Then the lightest light would be on the edge. So the lightest light is going to be slightly inside the edge because the light's slightly around to the front of this object, because I have a concave curve and more light and shadow. So my gradation pattern on a spherical shape, the gradation is going to darken. Once I identify where that lightest area is, where the light source is hitting most directly, my gradation is going to be light to dark away from that point. All right. So as I move down, so this is going to go light to dark this way. So as I come down here, the light's going to be darker. And as I move up towards that point, it's going to get lighter. So it's not a bad idea at the beginning to especially if you've got a white object, to just hit that lightest area, just pull out as much as you can. Now the gradation that's going to make this thing start looking like it's turning, we've got to be kind of patient, because the more seamless this gradation of light to dark is, the more convincing that turning illusion is going to be. The other side of this is I want to make sure that I maintain that difference between shadow and light. Go back and darken my shadow just a little bit. So here's that core shadow area along here that I was talking about up there. Area of the shadow that's furthest away from the source of the reflected light, which is coming this way. Again, what I want to work towards is identifying that area where it's lightest and then grading light to dark away from that point. Also important when you're shading, when you're creating these gradations, is to make sure that you're working the background as well. You can imagine that if I didn't have a tone here and I just had the white of the paper, this wouldn't look as light. So you can help yourself a lot by go ahead and committing to filling in these tones around the object, as well as light and shade on the object. So again, working this it takes a little bit of time, but in the light, what I'm working towards is a light to dark this way, in the shadow, basically a light to dark this way. And at the same time that I'm doing that, trying to maintain this big difference between, again, I just keep squinting. Does this light, and do these light and shadow shapes still separate the way they did at the very beginning when I just had them down as flat averages? Always trying to protect that difference between light and shadow. So this area along the shadow line is a really sensitive area where the light starts getting darker, because I want the light to be dark enough so that it feels like it's folding into that shadow, but not so dark that it feels like it's part of the shadow, because I have to keep this difference between the light and shadow. So it's kind of a ticklish area that just takes a little bit of time and effort to make it work properly. Okay, so you think you can see where I'm going. And again, it just takes a little bit of time and manipulating to create this nice seamless pattern. And again, the more seamless the pattern is of gradation from light to dark, the more this thing is going to fill out and turn. Okay.